killing of George Floyd, but I don't think I'd really kind of registered what he was doing in Minnesota until he kind of burst onto the stage like America's Next Top Model.
I would say, so I found out, as I find out most things, sitting at my computer, involved in some sort of text chain with Jon Favreau and Tommy Vitor and Lovett, et cetera. And I actually had woken up, I had convinced myself the night before that the way that I would do this, if I was the Harris campaign, is I would send out a video at 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. So to me, that means 3 a.m. this news is coming out. So I woke up, as I do many times a night. I looked at my phone at 3 a.m., no news. But you know what I couldn't really do after that? Go back to sleep.
Yeah.
So I had a very sleep-addled day waiting for it to come. I actually, not to brag about this, but I knew Tim Walz a while ago.
Yeah.
I will admit, I never for 1 second thought he was going to be the VP until, maybe the last week. But I was around in politics 100 years ago when he ran for Congress the first time. Mm-hmm. He was this amazing story that people loved because he was this football coach encouraged to run by his students in this district that no one thought a Democrat can win. This is 2006 when we were recruiting all these veterans to run because this was going to be the first election where people had really turned against the Iraq War fully.
Right.
And he had this ad. I talked about this ad on the podcast last week. It's an amazing ad.
Was this the one about his students? Like his students who went off to fight deserved?
He did. That's the one he did for the one I'm referring to is like his introductory ad that starts with him, starts with his military service, then state champion football coach, the teacher of the year, and then him. It's just like this great ad that I loved at the time. And then Tim Walz has this very fond place in the hearts of everyone who worked for Barack Obama because no one thought Tim Walz was going to return to Congress if he voted for the Affordable Care Act, and he did anyway.
Oh,
and
wow.
He said there was this list of people who were in these very endangered seats heading into that landslide election 2010 who, were taking great risk upon themselves to vote for the Affordable Care Act. And Tim Walz is one of a handful of them who said to President Obama, essentially, why run for office if all you want to do is stay in office? And so he voted, and most of them lost, but Tim Walz actually managed to survive and win. And so, it's very exciting to see Tim Walz here. If you had asked me to list 15 VP candidates for Kamala Harris a month ago, although that would have been chronologically impossible if you'd asked me to do that, Tim Walz would have not made my list, but I think I really come to think he's a perfect pick. Well, let me ask that. Why do you think she picked him over all the other people?
Also, all of those things. I actually think there is something really refreshing about someone who said years ago and continues to say, what's the point of amassing political capital if you're not going to spend it? And he spent it in really profitable ways in Minnesota. He's done things I think are actually progressive, but also make sense. So I think it's really hard to kind of pigeonhole him. He's a Midwesterner, but he's doing some of these progressive things. And the things that he's doing are just sort of common sense things that his constituents really like. So he's providing universal school lunch to kids so that poor kids can eat, but they're also not stigmatized when they get this provision. And he's an amazing communicator. I think that's going to be really important because she's going to need an effective surrogate on the stump. Gen Z fucking loves him. And
which is wild.
No, but also just of course, he's like the Coach Taylor from Friday Night Lights. And he doesn't look like Kyle Chandler, but he acts like Kyle Chandler. And I think he's really inspiring and people like him. And I truly believe that Gen Z can turn this election if it wants to. It is like a sleeping giant of an electorate that hasn't really been turned on. And if he turns them on, then, God love him. Let him do that. I think he's going to balance out aspects of this ticket. You can't really just sideline this as some kind of California ticket. He's a Midwesterner. He's Carhartt wearing, even if his politics are very progressive, he does have these Midwestern sensibilities and I think make it very difficult to just write him off as a leftist and subsequently to write the entire ticket off as this sort of pinko communist California ticket. I think all of those things are really appealing.
Yeah, in reading the reporting on this, it sort of jives with what I kind of expected in the sense that she just really likes Tim Walz, right? When you were picking your vice president, you're picking someone who's going to be in most of your meetings for 4 to 8 years. Yeah. The president and the vice president have lunch together once a week. So it's not just is this person going to deliver me this state? And they do this. It's I have to hang out with this person all the time. And Tim Walz seems like someone you would want to hang out with for sure, right?
Other women of color who have existed in the workplace will know what I mean. You can have people who are on your team who are not necessarily working to your benefit. They don't understand the assignment. And the assignment, when you're the principal, is to support you and to do it fully and joyfully. And I think one of the things that she probably really likes about Tim Walz is that he has a kind of Joe Biden-esque quality about him. I think one of the things I liked about Joe Biden was that he happily and cheerfully rode shotgun for the first Black president for 8 years, sidelining his own ambition to do it. And he did so happily and joyfully. And I think that there's something about Tim Walz that speaks in the same register. He's not going to mind ceding the stage to her. He gets that she's the principal. He's there to be the running back, to do whatever she needs to do to get the ball down the field. But he understands that he's the number two. And I think that's really important for the first woman president.
And I think that's such a great point. And there's just something about people who end up being vice president who never expected to be president. Like Tim Walz has never done a single thing that most governors imagine themselves as president and are doing. They're going to do the Iowa JJ dinner. They're going to do the 100 Club in New Hampshire and all that stuff. And they're planning for the day when the world will eventually recognize their talents and charms and make them president. And Tim Walz really hasn't seemed that way at all. He's just he was an accidental politician. He only ran because the students asked him to. And then he lasted longer than he thought he would. And then people were like, you know what, you'd be a great governor. You could do some cool stuff. So he ran for governor. And so he's just sort of in this to do the right thing. I think that's probably pretty appealing. Joe Biden obviously wanted to be president his entire life, but as President Obama's vice president, he never did a single thing to put his ambitions above President Obama's. Yeah. He even in the moment when he came out for marriage equality before President Obama, none of us, as frustrating as that was for those of us who are working on President Obama's rollout of his position, no one thought he was doing that. Joe Biden was doing that to put himself above President Obama, right? Like there was that trust there. And that's like absolutely essential for the working relationship. The other thing that I think led to this is there is something, very balancing to the ticket, right? Kamala Harris she is a woman of color. She is from Oakland, California. She was the district attorney of San Francisco, California. And to have as your running mate someone who is from the quintessential Midwestern state. He's a public school teacher, coach, gun-owning veteran of rural Minnesota. Like that is that's cultural balance, right? And like we should just be clear. Like I love Tim Walz. I hate JD Vance. The vice presidential pick adds maybe a point or two, or costs maybe a point or two, unless you like pull a Palin. But there are going to be these voters who are looking for tiebreakers, right? And they all live in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, in more rural areas. Maybe they voted for Obama in 2012, Trump in 2016, Biden in 2020. And Tim Walz can be a tiebreaker, right? It's a validation in some ways of who can, like him speaking about Kamala Harris is going to be very valuable with those voters, I think.
Well, I also think that he's very hard to pigeonhole. And I think that's also really valuable in a Veep pick. Like, so it is, I think, easy to pigeonhole her. She's from Oakland, California. You can talk for days about how California is, like you just tax these companies out of existence and they leave and they go to Austin. Tim Walz is a pro-labor governor, but he's also cultivated one of the most thriving economies in the country. Like Minnesota has an amazing economy. There are 15 or so blue chip Fortune 500 companies in Minnesota. And he makes clear that you can be pro-labor and it's not anti-business, that these things are not irreconcilable. You can give workers the protections that they want and that they need, and it doesn't affect your bottom line. You can still build a thriving economy. And I think one of the things that was so impressive to me yesterday when the pick was announced, there was a lot of hand-wringing from the business community about, there were other candidates that they thought would have been better for business. And then people immediately were like, what are you talking about? Minnesota is great for business. 3M, United Health, like Target. I mean, this is the man who cultivated the conditions for every American to go on a Target run where they are expecting to spend $20 and instead they spend $220. Like that's economic progress.
And I mean, there aren't a lot of people who could get enthusiastic tweets of support from both AOC and Joe Manchin in like a 3-minute period like Tim Walz did. So, I mean, it's just truly great pick. Now, while picking Josh Shapiro wouldn't have guaranteed a win in Pennsylvania, history in the polling says it would be easier with him on the ticket. Any chance this ends up being a major mistake?
I really don't like doing this Monday morning quarterbacking. I think you made your pick and now you lean into it and you run as hard as you can. And I think fundamentally, there was no perfect running mate. Like there
Right.
were a lot of really good people. You know, Kelly would have